There is a new court ruling from a court in Austria about Google Analytics. Is it now illegal? Can we still use it? What should you do? And what is my take on all of this? We'll discover all of this in this video. Hey there, Measure Geeks, Julian here, back with another video. And today we want to talk about this court ruling that just came out in Austria about maybe the future of Google Analytics and what it all means. Now, I need to preface this that I'm not a legal scholar. I'm not a lawyer. This is no legal advice. This is just a guy on the internet talking about his passion of analytics and Google Analytics as well. And we are going to dissect this a little bit, but don't take this as legal advice, especially if you are in a certain country. What does this mean for you? Please contact your legal advisor or your lawyer in order to hash this out for your business. There can be very complex circumstances that you are in that I can't foresee in this video. So don't take this too seriously, although it's a serious topic. All right, so what the hell happened? In the last few weeks, we had a lot of different opinions. We read maybe a lot of things about the future of Google Analytics, if you can still use it or not. And we want to dissect this a little bit here. So there was a ruling in Austria, so that's this other German-speaking country under Germany, that the privacy advocates sued a website that and then the court ruled that the usage of Google Analytics was not appropriate to the rules, the privacy laws in the European Union. So it is kind of against the privacy standards in Europe. Specifically, this website had Google Analytics, Universal Analytics installed. They did not have a cookie consent banner at that time, and they didn't have anonymized IP enabled on that kind of setting. So that data was sent over to Google servers, and the ruling kind of said that this was not the right, this tool couldn't be used to actually protect the privacy of the European citizens who went to this website. Now, in order to explain this a little bit more and the ruling, we need to go a step back and look into, unfortunately, a little bit of the history of European privacy law. And obviously, there's a lot more beforehand. The European Union came up with a privacy law, a framework, which is called GDPR, which was kind of settled in 2018. That's when it became effective. And it brought us a lot of different things like cookie banners and all privacy policy changes and so on. And consent is the biggest word probably in the world of analytics nowadays. Now, going back to that and maybe looking what it was already there before GDPR was around, there was a data transfer agreement. So anytime I send data from a European citizen, personal data, into another jurisdiction where data is saved, for example, in the USA, then the European Union had a treaty with the US called the Safe Harbor Agreement that would ensure that the same privacy standards that we have here in Europe would be adhered to in the US. And there were a lot of different revelations around how the NSA is spying on things and so on. And at some point in 2015, the law was actually made was declared insufficient by the European courts, saying that this data is not safe in the US, and there needs to be a new standard, a new treaty that will ensure that the privacy of European Union members would be protected. So they came up with a new kind of treaty, which was the Privacy Shield. And the Privacy Shield should ensure, again, there were some negotiations going on, and it ensured that the US said, yes, this will be guided under your laws, and we will be able to utilize that data in the US. And that was shut down famously in 2020. Now you might be saying, okay, now there's a new law, right? No, there is no new law, there is no new treaty just yet. They are still negotiating it. don't know if this will actually happen in any time soon. This is a legal politics matter. And in the end, we don't currently have like a treaty how to transfer data legally into a US entity like Google and save our data on a server in the US, because the European courts think that data wouldn't be protected by the GDPR over there. Obviously, these companies are not under European law. And this is a very decisive point. We don't have currently this treaty that ensures that this data would be sufficiently protected by any agencies from the US, for example, especially intelligence agencies like the NSA, CIA, and so on. There could be a backdoor into these companies, and they could get private data from European users. And that is actually the court ruling, going back to the court ruling that we had in Austria. That's the main point that they had in this court ruling, saying, okay, even if you are sending data over to Google in the US, we can't, or Google can't sufficiently guarantee that this data, our privacy, the privacy of the European Union citizen would be protected, because it's not legally on European servers anymore, and there is no data transfer agreement currently in place, and Google doesn't have the ability or doesn't have the safeguards in place in order to make sure that this data is not being violated. So in a sense, you can say that, yes, it was kind of a case that it was an easy case, kind of, that this website had universal analytics running. It had no anonymized IP feature installed. It didn't have any consent banner installed. So kind of an easy target. But even if they have done this correctly, there might have been the same ruling, because they're still sending data, even if it's anonymized, even if it had consent in place. Even then, this data would be transferred over to Google servers, which are in the US, and wouldn't be protected correctly according to this ruling. Now, what this means would be that, Google Analytics itself shouldn't be used on a website. So is Google Analytics now illegal? Well, kind of, yes. In a court ruling is kind of a ruling of what is allowed and what is not allowed. Now, it is not a general consensus, a law where it says, hey, Google Analytics cannot be installed on a website. So technically, it's not something that is written into law, but one court, in Austria at least, has decided this. This is important to note, that this could have ripple effects, right? Anyways, there's not only, Austria is just one country in Europe, and there are many other countries that could decide differently. The privacy advocate group that actually started this whole lawsuit, or not lawsuit, but the complaint to the privacy entity there in Austria, they have filed many other complaints in many different other countries, and there are a lot of different other court rulings still outstanding. Now, it's probably sheer coincidence that Austria was the first one to say, okay, this is how we think it's going. Now, it could be that any other country might see this court ruling and say, like, oh, they already decided it, so this is kind of, they decided this way. I don't see any fundamental wrongdoings here, so I will decide it the same thing, right? So it's kind of this ripple effect throughout the lawsuits that might be ruled in the future. Not saying that this will always go the same way, but it is interesting that Austria at least has decided it this way. Now, the second way that this actually, what this actually means in the interpretation of this is, yes, maybe Google Analytics is illegal, but then also all other services that might be sending data into the US, private data information, might be illegal. Which would mean a Facebook pixel, a Twitter pixel, all the pixels out there that have US services, right? A pixel that sends data or an edge service just like Cloudflare might be illegal. Any kind of widget that you install, like a chat widget or so, that sends data or has a connection to the US would be illegal. Thinking about this, okay, if I need to uninstall Google Analytics, then I would also, in order to be safe, need to uninstall all of the other services that might run the internet and might break things, right? So this is something that isn't really about Google Analytics. It's more about how do we handle the data transfer between US and Europe. So in a sense, I wouldn't say that Google Analytics is like, this is just the analytics tool that I'm running on the website. No, if we are taking this seriously, then we also need to take all the other tools that we have installed on the website seriously and not use them anymore if we wanted to adhere to this ruling. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is Google's response to all of this? So they have written a blog post that I will link up, or I already linked up down below, that you can look into, and they kind of reiterated everything they do to protect users' privacy. They also have a defense kind of saying that, well, we never received a request from the US government to give up this data from European Union citizens, and therefore it's preposterous to say that we are giving data over. It's kind of a weak defense, I guess, in a sense that, yeah, if it's not happened yet, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in the future. That said, they're kind of stuck in the middle here, right? On the one side, what could change is obviously the technology, and they're kind of doing stuff on that side already over the years. They have introduced Google Analytics 4. For example, Google Analytics 4 has anonymized IP feature enabled by default. You can also export data now to BigQuery, which lives on the Google Cloud. And in the Google Cloud, you can choose where your data is stored. So you could store it inside of the European Union. They have mechanisms to do that. Broader speaking, they are also working on replacing other privacy-conscious things like cookies with the initiative of Privacy Sandbox and Flock and all of these different protocols that they have brought out. I don't know what exactly the status is there, but they have pushed this back, the whole rollout, and we'll see how this works out. Maybe then we will have something that is not as invading into privacy anymore. But yeah, the method, what Google could actually do as well is to say, we are going to give users the ability to host their data, Google Analytics data, in Europe itself in order to make it available to the laws in Europe. This is something that is obviously, why don't they do that? That's kind of the question. One thing is that they would need to have an entity inside of the European Union that is not connected to the mothership in the US. So there needs to be an independent entity, and maybe that is feasible for Google, but then also all the other services out there, right? Cloudflare and your Twitter Pixel and so on, they all needed to have entities and save that data in the European Union. Is that the solution? That's the question. And if targeting is still usable in that case, that's anybody's guess. Okay, what should you do now? And I kind of had this little diagram here. I want to talk about the spectrum. Legal matters, I think, in our industry are on a spectrum, especially when we look at starting a business, for example. You're putting yourself out there and you are taking on risk. Not only risk if your business will fail, but also legal risk. So you could be sued because you now have an entity. If you sell anything on the internet, you making yourself liable to a certain degree. And everybody who runs a website or works with clients is probably familiar with that. Now, this legal risk is that we are facing now with this new kind of ruling has become a little bit clearer, but it's still a spectrum. On the one hand, you could say, I want to do everything right I can do. And that might be the case for a big bank. They kind of need to play by the rules. Otherwise, it could cost a lot of money. On the other hand, you could say, I'm not gonna take care of any of that right now and see how it plays out. Obviously, then you are higher exposed to being sued or being able to somebody complaining to you. You could obviously go the middle way and say, I'm gonna do the things that I need to do in order to feel a bit safer, but I can't go all the way because then I will lose my ability of marketing my products, for example, because I don't use Google Analytics or any of the other tools anymore. And yeah, kind of in between European websites, I've seen that they move probably more in between and say, okay, I will install cookie consent, I will install anonymized IP, I will make my website as safe as possible from my understanding that I don't violate the European privacy laws, but I'm still going to do advertising on Facebook and Twitter and so on in order to have my data still available. So I can't tell you where you should be on the spectrum. You need to decide this for yourself and also for your client. And you would need to look at your laws and how exposed you are potentially to being sued, to being reported to one of these privacy advocates. Now, I would say that privacy is something that we all should be conscious about. And therefore, we should make sure that we have this in mind and watch this very closely. But to be honest, when I look at my take, and this is like kind of my opinion right now, I don't know if you want to follow this, but one thing that I have learned over the years, especially with GDPR when it came out and all of these different laws and new technologies that are coming out, iOS 15 and so on, is that really we as marketers need to stay flexible. And the first rule here is probably to all calm down a little bit, look at the situation, see how it plays out, and see how the different market players react. And when I see something like, hey, is this illegal now? And take it off your website, I wouldn't go to that extreme. Because again, the internet wouldn't run if we all take this too seriously. We would need to install many different tools from our websites. And it doesn't mean that you cannot use Google Analytics anymore. It would also mean that you are not able to use Facebook anymore or whatever, right? So this is something we would need to take into account in order to still do marketing. I think we have no other chance to right now chill a little bit and see what is going on. If more and more of these rulings will come out, you are not only exposed on the Google Analytics side, you're also exposed on the other side of the other tools that you have installed. So that's why I can't imagine that this really will spiral into everybody uninstalling Google Analytics and switching over to a different tool, whatever that would be. But again, you need to decide on the spectrum where you lie and where you want to go. I, for one, I'm a Google Analytics user. I like the tool and I hope that Google does something on the side. Hopefully they will bring our servers here to Europe. I hope that our politicians will figure something out with a follow-up on the privacy shield that we had in place, that hopefully this time will stand. I hope that we will be able to move forward from there with new technologies and be able to have a more a privacy-centric world where we can still do analytics and the cool stuff that we can do with our data. So this is kind of my take on this. But I want to also just acknowledge, like, what could the future look like, right? We're kind of running on the edge here and it's getting narrower and narrower, and maybe we'll fall down at some point because it just snaps and everybody needs to uninstall Google Analytics also, or we are not allowed to use any of the services anymore, or the European Union says, okay, we are now with China and we block off everything, and you can only use European products in this realm, and no more Facebook for everybody and no more Instagram. I don't know. This is probably rather extreme, but the future is probably, again, you need to stay flexible. Everything will move forward from here. There will be new laws, new court rulings. You need to keep up to date with those. You need to stay fresh on the developments on the technology side. Google Analytics 4 is probably something that Google will push more and more. and see if there's any kind of chance to host Google Analytics at some point yourself. The new technologies are out there, so you can provide more security to your users with the privacy, like server-side tracking, so you have the ability to actually use that data and do all the pipelining in itself, and be able to do good business in the future as well. And hopefully our politicians will get their butts out of their seats and start working together in order for us to have a good transfer agreement of data, because otherwise the internet as we know it doesn't work anymore. So these are my kind of tags, how the future would look like and what you would need to look into. And just as a wrap up, there was a new law, there was a court ruling in Austria which kind of said that you can't use Google Analytics, not for the reason of certain configurations, but this transfer of data into the US, and it couldn't be guaranteed that the data wouldn't be violated by intelligence services, all coming back to the missing follow-on to Privacy Shield. And Google reacted in a way that they are working on this. Obviously, technology might change, laws might change, and hopefully we'll be able to solve this and get a little bit more security in here. For my take, what you can do is work on your spectrum of where you want to be on the spectrum and see what you need to do in order to feel safe out there. It's obviously a lot of fear that entered the market, and now people are kind of looking for Google Analytics alternatives. But my personal take is that it's too early to say, hey, let's switch over and use something else. So I hope this helped you out. If you want to find out more a little bit about GDPR, I've done a video actually in 2016-17 right here. I think it still stands up to the test of time. And yeah, I hope this helped you out. My name is Julian. Till next time.